Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tony Talks and Get Up and Grow, where I have conversations with inspirational leaders, influencers, and change makers. People that aren't just doing well in life, but that are doing good in the world by contributing back to society through their acts of kindness, through sharing their knowledge and their wealth of information, and helping others to grow and do well in life and in business. And today, it's Monday. So we know what Mondays are. We've gotten used to the Marketing Mondays with the one and only, the great Scott Martin. Oh, hold on, as my laptop rocks around here. And he's already on it. Let's bring him on screen. What's up, Scott?
Hey, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Again. I am like, what was it you said? This is a show for, you didn't say disruptors. You called them something else.
Change makers.
Change makers. Yeah.
Change makers.
To change for sure.
Yeah, change makers, agents of change, disruptors. And, that's what we need, right? We need more of that. We're seeing a lot of unfortunate disruption in ways that aren't really good. But sometimes just disrupting the status quo and how things are done, certainly in business, right? Disrupting how things are done is the way to grow, is the way to get to the next level. Innovation is sparked out of necessity, right? So I think we've had this conversation before where, the current situation that we had with COVID forced everyone to have to innovate, have to do business in a different way, have to communicate differently. Certainly now we've got more stuff coming down the pike, and, there's always something that we've got to do to be able to innovate and get our message across in different ways. And again, I love having the conversations with you weekly because you expand my mind, not just mine, but everyone that watches live and the replays, and gives us, and I get messages all the time. Hey, thanks, man. I picked up another nugget today. I love that you have Scott on. I was actually just talking about you on a mastermind that I was just on. Literally, like I got off a couple of minutes ago to jump on with you, and we were just talking about what you do and what we do here. So I'm just grateful for you and for how you show up.
Thanks. Well, I love it that it's like I have no idea what we're gonna fucking talk about. We made the decision less than a minute ago, and I'm like, okay, I guess I can talk about that. So I like it because this keeps me on my toes. I'm like, if I really know my shit about marketing, I should be able to like go toe to toe with no warning. And I actually think that's true. I think that's exactly a good way to maybe test the metal, the depth of a marketing individual. Is it pre-canned, or can they actually adapt and be on their toes and be able to deliver something, whatever it is? And for me, I totally will admit certain things I don't know, but for the most part, if it's in marketing, it's in my bucket. I probably have a really strong opinion about it, and I've done something with it, and I'm probably doing lots of it. So
yeah, listen, that's what I kind of love about the unscripted show. And perhaps it could be more linear and more regimented and everything else, but I kind of like the fact that it's completely unscripted. We get on a couple of minutes before and we talk about whatever is either on our minds or something.
Oh, this is way easier than me doing my webinars, because webinars, I got all this prep time, and this I had 5 minutes to spare, and the prep was 30 seconds ago, a conversation I had. So I like it. It's kind of fun. It makes me see what I'm capable of. It makes me feel like I have to be, mentally ready. So,
well, it's like what are we talking? It's like you said, testing your metal. One of my favorite quotes that I post often is just an image of a knight's armor, and it says, "A knight in shining armor is a knight whose metal has never been tested." Right. So
it's funny. I watched the movie 300 last night.
Oh,
actually,
one of my favorites.
Yeah, I liked that their shields were dinged up. They didn't go into battle with perfect shields, and I was like, I like the detail. It's kind of it made it feel more real.
Yeah,
as CGI as it was, but
well, and the reality of it is, business is a battlefield of sorts, right? Marketing is a battlefield of sorts. You're not fighting anyone, but you're fighting for the eyeballs. You're fighting for the attention. You're fighting for the leads and the sales and just people's time, right? And their attention. So you are fighting for that in a way, right? So showing up sometimes and just being ready, be ready for the unexpected, or expect the unexpected. So that's what I kind of like about about these, and people will say, well, do you have interview questions? I said, I have some that I can go to if the conversation stops flowing. But for the most part, we're just here to give value, drop content. So what we're going to talk about today, just like what we were talking about just a minute ago, the importance and the value of podcasting, of getting your message out. As a matter of fact, one of the women, the ladies, I should say, that was on the mastermind just jumped on here as well. She just said, hey, Tony Rodriguez, first time tuning in. Love your show already. So that's awesome. And Robert Booker says, you are fighting more often than not. Absolutely. Listen, life, I hate to equate life with being a fight or a struggle, but the reality of it is, in an ever-changing atmosphere of business, of marketing, of humanity, Charles Darwin has a great line. He says, it is not, or had a great line, right? He doesn't have it anymore. It's not the fastest or the strongest that will survive. It's those who are most adaptable to change or most capable of changing, right? And that's really what we're talking about, is changing in marketing and being able to move on the fly and make last minute decisions and be able to move and dance, bob and weave, as they say. So talking about marketing, we're going to talk about podcasts and how getting your message out is important, and maybe what that looks like, whether it be just podcasts or just coming on to your Facebook Live or to Facebook or to Instagram or to wherever other platform that you use, and just letting people know who you are, what you do, and start sharing your message, right?
You want me to go now?
I do. I talk to them.
I have to follow up with that, because to me, there's so many people that go, if marketing is a battle, they go in unfit, unprepared, unwilling to do the work, and actually go out and do the battle. They try to go, I want to do this, but I want to be a general. I want to just be in the back, and I want some automatic soldiers to go out and grow my business. And I just think that if you look at like the movie 300 I was watching, like he at the very front, not the very back. And that's what I think a lot of marketers do. That's one of the disruptive things that I think is actually accelerating, is far too many marketers are going, what is the way that I can hack or automate or do this without doing any work? If you were to say, how can I create content without doing any work? How good would your fucking content be? So why is marketing any different? You have to apply maybe even more quality energy, not automation. It's about and honestly, if you have good quality of content, you actually would need less marketing. So it's like that really great quote that I hear all the time, which is, advertising is tax you pay for being unremarkable, right? It's the same thing with marketing. So it's like, so to me, with growth marketing and really thinking about like what we're talking about content, which is podcasting as a content, I just want to make sure we're kind of talking about the same thing. What content is, if you create content that is so compelling and so amazing, and you really double down there, you will actually create less energy required to then market it. And if you do that, you can start thinking, if it's such good quality, you will know the value of it, and you will do things much differently. Because I think when people are transactional, I don't think they know, like they go, I wonder if we'll sell it for $9.99. Let's just do a big bomb. Let's do a funnel or whatever, right? But I think if you go one-to-one and you really want to build relationships, and you go, I know this is good, this can totally help you. That mindset of marketing, what would I do to make sure that this would really help people, because I know it's of good value? I'd follow that up with, right now there's so much free content, podcasts, that so many people are trying to sell content. Your giveaway content, to even get their attention, has to be at a level that people will pay for it. And that's what I'd lead into this podcast, is going, we're saying how you should get your message out there. I want to be clear. Fucking podcasting is not for everybody. I don't even recommend it. And I'll tell you who it's not for before I tell you why you should do it. I think there's so many people just barfing up really bad content, or just going, I need to be on podcasting because it's like a trend, is exactly the wrong reason.
Right.
To me, the reason to be on there is that you have a unique point of view. You're carefully architecting a message you're finding and defining your own niche. And if you feel that this is going to be something of extreme value and you're willing to put it out there, I believe then you're probably in the group of going, you should build a podcast. The reality is, I think it's something like 80% of podcasts have less than 3 episodes. Why? Because they didn't realize they realized it's actually fucking work. It's actually really hard to produce a good podcast. So
and they didn't get 100,000. Yeah, and they didn't get 100,000 views on the first, second, or third one. They're like, I quit.
Yes, it's like podcasting is like death by paper cuts for someone who's lazy. Good fucking luck. So if you want to do it, like just like you, how many people have the tenacity to do? I see you doing your video. You got your 100 days of videos. You're doing this every day. You are the master of consistency, and that is going to serve you if you can then up level your content, like get better guests than me, whoever, it's like you can up level your ability to market it, right? So,
better than you in marketing, brother.
I don't know about that, but it's like there's a lot of people are incredible, and one of the other components is don't believe me. I'm going to show you some podcasting. Go do your homework for yourself. I think that the biggest thing is if you really feel compelled, regardless of what I say, then do it. Even if it's just a hobby thing, I don't care. So I'm not trying to be too hard. Like if you just want to do a podcast, go for it. But if you're really trying to do it as a business mechanism, that's what I want to talk about. I feel like that's the area we should talk about. I'm not going with the fiction writers. I can kind of show you a slideshow of the different areas of podcast so that everybody can kind of envision it. But for me, my specialty is not the fiction, not the I want to just do rants. It's like, how do you make podcasts turn into content that then drives leads that then turns into business? That is the podcasting that my specialty goes into. All the other podcasting is, a little different. The other thing is everybody talks about, oh my God, like what about like, let's get podcasting. Like, how do I monetize podcasting? Before I even begin going down this whole discussion of podcasting, if you're going into podcasting that wanting to monetize it, I think you may just be stepping on the wrong direction. It's probably the world's worst thing, unless you have the most compelling. You've already got a massive audience. You've already got influence. You've already got mechanisms. You've already got your funny is beyond imagination. You're already creating content that's meaningful. Joe Rogan made it very successful because he already had great content. He was funny. He had 2 ecosystems of MMA and comedy and was able to bring on extraordinary guests that created massive momentum, and he's freaking witty. So, but it's also a live show and people want to see what's happening, right? So he kind of treated it like a little bit liveness, and he's really smart in the way he asks questions. So just got to put that out there going, that is not the bar. He is really outstanding. Not that I don't want to say, hey, you can't be that way. What I'm saying is that be realistic and have a strategy of how you can get to there.
Yeah.
And what you're doing by being consistent and going on, that's how you get there. If you have tools, awesome. But I think most of the people that are listening to this don't have those tools.
Well, listen, you know what? And here's the thing. I agree with everything that you said, and you've got to dare to suck. You've got to dare to suck, right? Because every expert was once a beginner. So if you're going to start a podcast, you're going to start a video show, you're going to start whatever you're going to start at, you got to be willing to suck. You got to be willing to face the critics.
Agreed. Right? Agreed, actually. Yeah. And the process so I did a webinar and in 2 hours, I got a bunch of people to start their own podcast at the end of 2 hours. And I wanted to show them that even though I produced a really high-end podcast, that I actually did a test with a process of totally doing a one-take intro edit on my phone that, to me, I will eat the same dog food if I'm giving that, and I wanted to test to see if it would work, see if people would follow, and it works. So you're right. It's not necessarily the quality. What sucks might be you might not be the best podcast interviewer. That's okay. When you come off as authentic, but if you got a good angle and you got good content, good guests, and you're just kind of like figuring away, great. Don't wait to get perfect. So I think I agree with what you're saying to make sure that I think I don't want to push people into thinking they got to be like, you got to get this all worked out first. So do you want me to share some slides? I mean, I'll bounce around webinar and pick you that'll make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Cue it up.
We'll see how this goes. So I need to, me, if I'm doing this, I'm not necessarily looking right at the camera, so people understand. Don't worry about it.
When I see it pop up, I'll pop it up. While you cue it up, I'll just
all right.
Another.
Sharing my screen. I think it just said it's sharing both my monitors, but I only want one. There we go.
Sharing, yeah. So what I was going to say is make sure that whatever you put out is something that you would want to listen to, something that you would actually the standard should be. if you would pay to listen to, whether it's going to be out there for free, but would you pay to listen to the content that you're producing? And by the way, with that said, there's a lot of content that you can make that is going that could be interesting or it could be specific. For example, I'm a beekeeper. I keep a couple of beehives, and I've seen a lot of people do a lot of bee videos and YouTube videos. And by the way, I think that what we're talking here about podcasts, I would say that a lot of it is a mirror to YouTube. Would that be accurate, Scott?
A mirror to YouTube in terms of niche and interest.
Yeah, not a mirror necessarily, but some of the rules that you're about to go through right now, I think apply to both video and to audio, because again, you're still sharing a message. Obviously, when you're on camera, you've got to maybe look a certain way, not look a certain way, but like put it this way, you can't come on here with your makeup all smudged and a half shaven beard unless that's part of your part of your stunt, so to speak.
Some of it is, some of it isn't. I mean, obviously YouTube's, well, not obviously, but like YouTube, one of its strengths is that it's like acts as a search engine. Where podcasting, you can get found, people do search, but not as much to the level that YouTube does. So I feel like it's more of a medium that is generated through the quality of content, or you're driving people to get the content activated. It's more of a content activation required, like a blog is. Like a blog, you have to actually get people to read your blog. So where YouTube, you can get found, and so you got more levers. So in that regard, that's challenging. But on the other regard is people are not looking for more screen time. Like I'm not looking for more time from my screen. I'm looking to leverage my time when I'm driving, when I'm doing. So podcasting is totally transforming because of those reasons and more.
Awesome. So here we go, sharing the screen. So very important to remember the model, the idea there is make sure that you're putting out something that you would want to listen to, and not to just hear yourself speak. I guess is probably
okay. So I'm not seeing my screen. Mine just blacked out.
You're blacked out, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Let me go.
I don't know what's going on there.
Oh, blacked out again. Oh, there it is again.
Yeah, blacked out again.
There we go.
So I'm gonna press play.
That's a cool picture, by the way.
Oh, thanks. All right. So, what do I do? I by the way, this is unplanned. I'm just going with what screens are here. Some of them I'm going to rip by because this was a 2-hour webinar. I'm just going to find things that make sense. So in essence, what do? I help you control your marketing spend and particularly grow your business using unconventional strategies and common sense, if anybody cares. So I've worked with lots of big brands before. Anyone that's been on the show, I don't want to dive into that. I've got a book coming out. And this might be a little bit more of a longer intro than I wanted. So I'm just trying to get through here. Okay, here we go. It's a little bit of a delay. I don't know why it is in the change of slides.
Yeah, I don't know if that's your internet may be lagging a little bit. I don't think it's mine.
I'm plugged right in.
Sorry.
So sorry, it's just like I feel like I've got a delay on this. Maybe I'll just make it smaller. Maybe I won't put it into full screen. Sorry, guys that's watching. I'll try to do this, and I think this might be a lot easier, and I won't have to flip through them. How's that? Does that seem okay? This will work just fine, I think.
Yeah, seems fine.
All right. So 100%. There we go. So my podcast is, if anyone's interested, it's called the Groundswell Marketing Podcast at groundswell.fm. I've had basically the top marketing people in the world, and the ones that I'm dropping are absolutely insane. It just gets better. So the first thing I want to sort of mention as a strategy is who you pick as guests, your first 3 guests, can make a massive difference into the bar. You have 2 options. One is warm up, meaning I'm going to pick friends or people that I want to build up to and build momentum and then maybe introduce people, or set the bar immediately so that it's a lot easier to track guests. So what I did was the strategy that I had was basically I knew Don Peppers, Joe Pine, 2 unbelievable, well-renowned marketers in the world, and Bruce Kasanoff. And I picked them as my first guests because I knew them. I've been working in personalization with them for over 25 years. And so they were my first ones that I knew, but they also set the bar so that when I went out to Neil Patel, Hughes, Tim Williams, all these guys, they were like, oh, they were on, yeah, I'll be on. So it creates momentum that way, but you don't have to do that. That's just what I did. Yeah, so I've been in the top 100. Today I was in Switzerland last week. I was top 10, and I was just in a couple of countries. I'm in the top 10, but it changes all the time. So I wouldn't get too caught up on where you are, because podcasting, it literally moves daily. One of the things that I think really makes a big difference for you, for fuel for doing this, is the reviews. Like, I get these crazy amount of reviews that just are so energizing. And that's one thing I want to say before I give you the big caveat of why you might want to not do it. One of the reasons you really also want to do this fulfillment is when you really know that your content helps people and you get the feedback, it's honestly, it's like, it fuels me. It's incredible. It's such an incredible feeling to have that. And I've got, I think I've got like about 50 ratings at 5.0, nothing less than 5.0. And that's a part of getting the reviews. And I was on new and noteworthy for marketing and business for 4 straight months on launch. And I did it through reviews organically. I didn't hack it. I didn't do fake reviews. I basically, all I did was I made sure, one-on-one basis, anybody that was listening or would listen to me, I said, hey, do you mind posting a review? And I just did that on everyone I ever talked. And so anybody that listens to my podcast, anyone that's on the show and you listen to my podcast, I just ask you the same thing. Please leave a review. It makes a big difference. And if you have family and friends, you can ask them or people that you know. So that'll be a great way to get your podcast going. And one of the other results of being a podcast, so one of the benefits is you get invited to other podcasts. So now I'm like, it's accelerating my reputation. I'm getting onto more podcasts. I just got off a call about doing being one of the key speakers at a summit. I just did a summit, the Entrepreneurs Playbook Summit last week. So when you do a podcast, it's like a form of PR. Now, whether or not you have a lot of people listening or not, doesn't necessarily mean it's not the same as, in some ways, it's like if you have a good audience, or even if you had a small audience and you've put out some great episodes and you pass that along going, hey, you want to get a sense of maybe how, interviewing me for your magazine, or me being on your podcast, or me being part of a public speaking, that's a huge tool. So even if you don't go after the audience build, meaning I'm going to build a big audience, if you just produce great content, to my earliest point, it can serve you in ways that actually create a direct impact to your business and indirectly massive revenue. If you think about it, like if people are writing books or doing these things and they get invited to go speaking, or you're able to have a stage and you got access to all these individuals and you want to sell your course or your product, that is like the amount of advertising would be required to reach the amount of people. I think that the Entrepreneur's Playbook, I couldn't believe the numbers that people had reached. And I'm like, I would have never spent that money on advertising even if I wanted to. You know what I mean? So it's like these things, they start adding up. So anyways, I just want to say that's a really great benefit of doing that. Another benefit, if you can even read this, is Joe Pine, my guest, who's one of the top business strategists. Time Magazine named him one of the top 10 minds in business, I think a couple of years ago of our decade, or the last decade. And he said 3 people reached out to him because of his podcast. He was so happy about being on my podcast. I've had him back 2 other times. And he charges $40,000 to $60,000 to speak an event. And basically the talks that are on my podcast, here's a tip. The ones that he does public speaking for at that price, he basically did those talks and more on my podcast. So I really feel like the value is incredible for people in there.
Nice.
For me, mapping it to a sale, mapping it to an outcome, mapping it to a call to action. My map to call to action for everything is to my newsletter. I'm putting together what's going to be one of the most insanely interesting marketing magazines, all the inside tracks of all these techniques that I've never really shared, and all the people that I'm related to, the people that are on my podcast. I'm creating basically an insider email newsletter. And you, Tony, you follow me on my social media, right? Like my marketer magazine and social. How much great content's on that? Pretty good, dude, right?
Awesome.
I don't think anybody's doing those kind of like that commentary about advertising marketing that I am, and I'm giving it away. That's what I'm giving away. What am I actually giving away when I'm doing my email? So that's what my podcast is, part of me promoting that.
That's why I said this is have conversations with people that are contributing back, and that's one of the ways that you contribute back. And I love it. By the way, here's a little shameless plug right in the middle of this. Scott's podcast is now on the screen. It's groundswell.fm. Check it out.
Please write a review. It'd be awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And you can find it on YouTube as well. So one of the other reasons, thank you for the plug. One of the other reasons that I'll share with your guests that I share as an insider for the Platt partners, because I'm not really, I'm already here on the slide, so I'm just gonna do, I normally wouldn't have done this, but this is a future look at what I'm up to next. But what is going to happen next is another reason to get into podcasting is the future is going to be in audio branding. And I'm about to drop a podcast in a couple of weeks with Jay Baer, who's one of the top experts in audio marketing. And we're going to talk about the future of audio. So maybe after I drop that might be a time for you and I to go into depth on this. So one of the reasons that I'm creating the podcast and a couple different, I'm using a long form on Groundswell. I have another one called Rip Currents that I'll share with you in a minute. And I've got a couple other formats. The reason I'm doing that is because the future is going to be around audio. And what does that future look like? Well, right now, have you noticed on your phone, if you talk and then all of a sudden an ad comes up and it's, how do they know that I was talking about that? Well, our devices are listening. More importantly, we're actually getting smart devices for ordering. So whether it's Alexa and so forth, but there's also search. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm actually moving toward creating Alexa briefings and flash briefings. And that'll be something that might be for a future episode, is talking about that. But that might be too sort of like next level of what's going on. I'm just touching it because it happens to be here and we're talking about it. But to give people an idea, how many times have you in the last little while used that for search? If you haven't, it's about to explode. It's going to go so fast. So think about your business. How are you going to be found? How are you going to be able to play the audio game if you're not sort of like dipping into it? So that's another really smart reason to be in podcasting, because it gets you sort of like in the voice search, voice marketing, get you into audio. And so it's basically going to change the game of marketing. And here's why. So search for Google, if you look at the searches done without this, and the future numbers that I could share, I didn't have them on here, will blow your mind, is when you search on your laptop or your phone, you get the top well, of course, Google pay, you got the paid promoted ones, but you get the first page, you get like maybe 10 or 15 listings, right? In your top 3 is the only ones that matter. What's going to happen to audio?
Oof.
One, it's going to be based on brand, memory, or whatever they serve up or most relevant. We don't know how the algorithms work, but basically those are the ways. So you really want to be thinking, how am I going to be found? Now's the time to be building your brand and reputation and really start thinking about how audio is going to be making an impact on that. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, let's just go back 2 slides to that cartoon, which says it all. Yeah, so I'm just going to read it out for anyone who can't see it. The future of e-commerce. It's a woman turning back to Alexa, ordered Kleenex, ordering Amazon Basics facial tissues, says Alexa. No, I said Kleenex, but Amazon Basics is 50% off the name brand. But I said Kleenex. Here's the weather for Phoenix.
Yeah. It's so what people do not understand is when people are racing for attention, racing for following, racing for these surface metrics. The real metric you want to be focused on is reputation that builds a brand that you can then be recognizable, so that you can beat out the systems these systems are aimed at not making you pay to play. Like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't know how many times I got to say this in different platforms. It's like, doesn't matter what it is. So your out is to build a reputation, build a brand, build something that people want to talk about outside of the system, that they remember it or has an emotional connection or a reputation that people will demand it, like this cartoon.
Yeah, I thought that cartoon was brilliant, because sometimes the cartoons say it all.
So I'm going to talk about, there's kind of like 3 podcasts that maybe I'll just kind of touch on that, and I'll give you some categorization afterwards. But there's like Podcast Pro, which is my Groundswell. It's like highly produced. I've got onboarding, for the guests. I make lots of cut up content for it. I make sure that the audio is great. Like, it's not on a full platform. I got great syndication. It takes a lot of money and time to do. Podcast Low, that's Podcast Pro. So Podcast Low, what I'm calling is, one of the ways that anyone can get on podcasting right away. And I did a webinar on, and maybe in the future we'll promote a webinar that I can do to help other people other than the small group I did, which I got a group of like 50 people that could go live on a podcast within 2 hours. That's Podcast Flow. Then there's the podcast video mashup, and that's what you're doing, Tony, which is basically having a video, pulling the content from that video, and then splicing it, and then making one piece into a podcast and the other piece into a video. These are the 3 common basic sort of structures that I see now. There's other ones, but that's kind of the basics, that most people are doing, right? So does that make sense? That Tony, that I described that very well?
Absolutely.
So Rip Currents, I did a test. I was going, how could I get up so quickly that anybody could get up? Because I'm going, the barrier to entry for someone to do the production I do, I'm like, there's no wonder people are podcasting. But I know people that have great things to say. So I know in our platform, so many amazing people that really want to change people's lives. So I'm like, I want to actually test the idea of like, how can I get up with zero technology, zero fuss setup, have a production ready, set to go, and then syndicate it on the fly. And I basically came up with, so I tested it with Rip Currents. My goal was to just every day do a 15-minute. I did about 8 episodes, and I literally did even the intro. I did with one take on my phone with no editing, and I edited the whole thing on my phone. And all the episodes are completely done through my phone, or I did it through my desktop, completely syndicated in one place. It was, so I basically broke down how do you do that. We don't have the time today for me to explain that, because we're talking about just like why you should pay attention to podcasting. So when people think of syndication, I want to just show people what that looks like. So syndication, what that means is that under what it says where to listen, or when you look at a podcast and you go, oh, I heard it on Spotify, I heard it on iTunes. That's what syndication means. Syndication is the more you can syndicate it on platforms like SoundCloud, and that's what trips people's up, because they realize that there's really a couple parts. First part is create the content, and then it needs to be edited usually through, like, say, GarageBand or something, right? Some audio platform. Then you produce it, then you got a final product. Then it needs to be hosted somewhere, like a website, right? Then once it's on a website, then it gets syndicated. That's the whole process simplified on what marketing is. So, or to marketing or to building and starting a podcasting and getting it out. Then there's the whole job of getting people to listen to it and all that stuff, which we can talk slightly about given the time. But not sure why this is here, but since I'm here, this is a quick explanation of, I know it's why. Because the reason I was doing this podcast test of doing Rip Currents and my other one is it's in my DNA. I'm a growth hacker at the core. I'm a really different individual, right? I'm a business and marketing strategist over 25 years, and I have all these sort of like components, but I've got this other piece, which is a growth hacker, which is creative marketing, technical marketing, data testing, conversion rate optimization, behavioral UX improvement, coding automation. Those are all the pieces. I'm kind of these 2 things put together. So that's why whenever I do these tests, I'm testing. I'm always testing. There's a lesson here. Maybe you could go on podcasting and you could test it and see if it works for you. That's okay too. So I'm always testing stuff to see what works. So, and I'm trying to get the most juice for people that they can out of every piece of content. So what I like about podcast is it's a really fucking great squeeze, because when you make a podcast, you can create a lot of content from just the audio of the podcast. You're up leveling even more when you could do the video from the podcast. So for this discussion, I'm not going to go into the video, because that alone, the different things you can create for the video is actually extraordinary. But for this, I'm just going to describe a little bit what you did. If you just did audio, what could you do with it? So in my little test, what I did was I basically, out of it, I created my podcast and on my platform. Then I also took that content and I put it on YouTube. Even though it wasn't video, I still put it on YouTube. You'd be amazed at how many people listen to podcasts with no video on YouTube. And then in addition to that, with each episode, I created a concurrent article for it. And in the article, I actually embedded the video on YouTube or on the other platforms. And I used that as another way to cross-promote the other episodes. And in it, I created a series. Meaning if you listen to one was called Give, the other one was called Grow. When you listen to one, I would say, oh, you missed the other episode? Just click here. That's called cross-threading. It's basically another way to kind of promote your podcast. So does it work? Yeah, like I've read stuff on Medium on these articles, and they get shared. I saw on Twitter that it got shared to this great big group, and I see these huge spikes. In fact, I think one of my articles got just recently spiked on Flipboard, and it just blew up. And it was like somebody on Flipboard shared it, and then it ended up going into this whole network. So, did you have a question? Because I noticed that you came up.
No, that was my dog just came up and put his head on the arm of the sofa.
Oh, okay. And then another technique is I take the podcast, so the same episode, and then I'll create a different article, and then to basically get into the network of my audience. So my guests, sorry. So for example, Joe Pine, the guy I mentioned before, who's like world renowned, I wrote an article called Customering, the Future of Marketing. I wrote it on my LinkedIn. Why? Well, he's on LinkedIn. His network is massive on LinkedIn. I didn't have to ask him to go, can you please email your audience this? I posted this article. I tagged him in it. I basically was in there. I wrote a really extensive article so that for him, being a guest and seeing this additional content and deeper level discussion and observation about that podcast, elevating the podcast, he then shared to his group, and he has all of his audience then looking at that and then going to the podcast. The lesson there is not just, hey, write articles and put it out there. The lesson, there's a couple lessons in this whole thing I'm describing. One, elevate your guests. So many podcasters have them on there. They're so focused on volume. So they just go, I'm going to get another person on, but they don't spend the time after the podcast in edifying the guest, saying there was so much amazing content on this. You need to go back and see this. In fact, so much that I wrote an article about it, edifying them and putting your guests on the pedestal. And then you can recycle that content over and again. That gets them going. Like it makes me like him. It makes them want to share so much more about my content and tell other people about it. So then I'm actually not spending any marketing, hardly any energy. I'm making a content that stays on my LinkedIn, creating better PR visibility for me. So this gives me more access to more article writing, which is going to help me get published in other articles. 2, more traffic to my profile, which gets me more traffic to my business. 3, more traffic to my podcast. And overall, it just creates a better quality sort of machine out of one audio broadcast. I mean, it's to me, that's just, and there's more, if you can believe it, just for this audio thing. My keeping pace here right now?
Yeah, no, that's awesome, dude.
So, so if you look at my channel, I now have just basically created a nice, easy screen grab for it, describe what it is, and now it's actually affecting my YouTube channel. I just did one with Master Co. So here's another really good strategy is I would do Master Co. And this is my breakthrough for YouTube is I realized that it's one thing to do it on. So we created a video to make it a podcast, but I decided to make the video and co-collaborate on an original piece of meditation content that he's never done anywhere. So another lesson here is co-create content. Not just interview, but also think about, we did an interview about energy in your business. During the podcast, I created a bonus content that I didn't put on my podcast. I alluded to it on my podcast. So you'd have to link to the show notes, and then I could then promote it, and he promoted it afterwards. So another thing to do is, you and I talked about this, when you're done interviewing somebody, create some exclusive content. I didn't make it exclusive. I just put it on YouTube and YouTube only, just to test this idea. It blew up. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I figured out how to make my podcast content go and then build up my audience on YouTube. Does everybody follow me on that? Did I make that too quick? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Your audio.
No, I said that's awesome. That was great that you created. I mean, you were already on the phone. You already had him on the show, so you just kind of went and did something, which now you're tagged to, and something new to him. So you leveraged his status on what he does to increase your numbers as well. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and I drove tons of traffic to him. I did a Bitly. I could track it. I know it worked. Like it worked for both of us. It was a win-win, right? So to me, what was cool about it was someone just said it right there. It's because it was exclusive, in addition, and bonus anticipated. We talked about it. It didn't arrive right away, but then I re-promoted it. It then it ignited all my traffic on his podcast and my YouTube account. So now I'm like, oh, I learned something new. So I just literally did that recently. So that's just an insight I'll share with you guys. If it works for somebody, great. This is another one that I'm doing, which is completely different strategy. So I think I told you on one of my previous episodes about how I built one of the largest surf art communities by not producing any content. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And in that, the reason I did it was because I'd already built 3 of the largest communities in surfing in Canada, heli skiing, cat skiing. And I did it because I was shooting that content. It was beautiful content. And I'm like, yeah, no wonder I became a really big group. I was like, the content was insane. But I'm like, what if I could create a group and then not create the content, just share content? So what that led to was me creating this other new community that you share all the time, Tony, which is called tribe.eco. Its entire aim that I built this little ecosystem of a Twitter, Instagram, and social media site, and now going to be this podcast, is about me elevating and sharing the stories that people are making a difference in the world. So I call it like making my friend list bigger, right? So when Tony writes a really good quote, I put it on Tribe. I put the stories in stories. I put, it's now got over 10,000, so I can do a swipe up. I can activate content for people. So anybody that's doing something amazing, if you're listening to this and you go to tribe.eco and you tag me and you're making an incredible, like you're doing something insanely cool about making the world a better place, the planet better, I want to know about it. I'll share your content on there. That's what it's all about. It's all about, there's no aim. I'm not selling anything. I'm just doing it because it's a marketing experiment. And what is happening is it's like, Tony, look how big is it? Like it's totally growing. So an extension of that is I decided, well, I've got all these amazing people on my Instagram that I'm sharing the content. I'm going to make a podcast series called Waves of Impact. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to do a half-an-hour interview, just like you're doing, Tony, on video. I'm going to put the videos on YouTube, but what I'm going to do differently is the videos on YouTube, the last half of the segment, I'm going to get them to show their wares. If they're selling necklaces, if they've got a PowerPoint, they want to show how they're changing cancer. The first part's like podcast, but only the last little bit will only appear on YouTube, and it'll be visual, meaning if you wait to the end, they're going to share their screen and they're going to show us something, right? So that's going to be really rich and interesting. So there's something to wait for at the very end that's only on YouTube, but it's still audio centric for the first beginning. And all I'm doing is a service. I'm just doing this. So if you have that content, I'll do it. So this will be an experiment that maybe I can come back and tell you how it worked. I've launched just my first one with Nolani Love called Be the Change. And so I guess this is my one slide for maybe wrapping up this segment, which is, this is me letting go. Me describing on how to go online and do it quickly and just make it all happen. It's kind of goes against my personal DNA because I'm a strategist. I really encourage people to take the time and I go through a process that we don't have time to go into today about understand who your avatars are, understanding who your audience is. What's your core message? Take the time to do it. Even though you may not do it well when you first do it, you'll do it much better and you'll feel more confident if you actually take the time to measure and plan it. So I call them podcast foundations, right? So the steps are, what are your goals? If you don't have a goal, what's the point of fucking doing it? Like you want to do it, just even if it's to get more people, I don't care, or want more PR, write it down. Develop a brand and a concept. So basically go, what are my colors? What is my, take the time and don't just sort of piece it, take the time in one sitting or a strategy session to really kind of develop that out. What's the theme or topic? And I'll show you an example of what the themes and topics. But one of the things you can do for helping yourself is if you know you're going to do marketing, go on other podcasts and start listening to their content, or look in the search bars in the different Spotify, iTunes, and look at who's ranking in the top 100 in marketing. What are they talking about? What are the names? Are you going to be competing on a name that everyone else has? Are you going to be different, or is it going to be searchable? So when someone was telling me they were going to do one called the ... and I said, call it that, but don't make sure you list it as that because people don't type in the. And because it's so hard to get searched and found, people make these really common mistakes in those things, right? In the name and how you name it. How is it unique? That's probably the biggest thing. And that's why, I think you were saying about beekeepers, doing a beekeeper podcast. I love it because when you're niche-y, that's how you get big. It really is. I think that you create a really core audience that wants to share it. And people want to do a deep dive with somebody. They don't want to do a surface dive. There is so many podcasts about the basics of marketing. So I don't just, for my podcast, if you're new to it, you're probably going to listen to it a couple times and take notes. And the one I dropped the last episode, top growth marketer, top 10, 15 in the world. And he drops a whole bunch of insights. I've listened to it twice because I didn't catch it all the first time. It's so insightful. So, for me, it's because I want people to know that when they go to mine, It's about sustainable growth marketing in unconventional ways, but using common sense. They know that that's where you get when they get there, right? Pick your length. Is it going to be, people need to know what they're going to expect, right? They need to know, is this going to be a 15-minute segments? Is it going to be an hour? If you kind of wish-wash, I don't think you're helping yourself, but there's no rules, so you can do what you want. And be frequent. Have a frequency and post so they know to count on it. I'm guilty of not being as frequent as I should. I try to do it every week, and I've got 5 podcasts sitting there I need to produce because I'm so busy. And the podcast tech, that's usually the thing that really trips people up is, where do I begin? What are the platforms and all that kind of stuff? So that I'm going to do another webinar. Maybe we can promote it on here, or there's lots of other webinars, resources out there for that. So this is in a chart, basically a way to build a map. Is just kind of what's my audience, who, where. Mantra is really important. What do you want them to feel when they listen to your podcast? What is, like, people are so focused on the what is it? People don't remember what you say. They remember what you hear, but when they hear your podcast and you make them feel a certain way and you're consistent with it, I think that is where you really hit the mark. Is it about, what's your growth plan? What's the behavior you want to have on this? Like, what's it all about? The themes. Are you creating additional content like I'm doing? Is it progression, meaning you're going to kind of just build it as you kind of go along? What's your story and all these kind of things? So this is sort of a long conversation about this one slide that I don't know that is going to have a lot of impact. So this is maybe a way, we can kind of get close to wrapping, but it's basically get to your why. Why am I doing this? The core reason that you're doing this. What's your mission, vision, and purpose for it? Write it down. Brand, position, and personality. What is this like feeling going to be? How are we going to present this? Like, the last piece is, what does it actually look like? What is the sound like? What is the production like? That's the last piece, not the first piece. Everybody's got it upside down. How do I make a podcast? No. Everybody is, so many people go, what tech do I use? I'm asking them, well, why are you doing it? What's your mission? They go, I don't know. Like, to me, it's ass backwards. To me, if you do it that way, the tech will take care of itself. It's an easy check the box. It's the other stuff that's harder to make it really successful. Mm-hmm. And so here's an example of a brand guide. So, I would just go, what are the colors, and be consistent, because they'll look more professional. Guests want to be on shows that they look in a favorable way. When you present them, when you're showing your cards, your album covers, your social posts, and it's professional and it's consistent, they appreciate it, and you get better guests. For example, I did with Sean Callagy, and I did a series. So it was a 3-hour episode, and I purposely made it color-coded on the 3 different podcast episodes, so that was really shareable, because I knew it was a series. I wanted not to compel people to go to one episode. I wanted to go to all 3. So I created a strategy for content that would do that, and was really tied in with the branding that he was doing at the time. Social media. So with what I did with David Miriam Scott, we basically launched it this is 2 things here. One is we launched it at a physical event. He was supposed to, he forgot to announce it on stage. That was the plan. But he did a total virtual announcement afterwards and made up for it. And what we did was we did a whole social media strategy using stories, and we activated it that way, as well as a bunch of other ways. So you can integrate it with, and if you're launching a special episode, like I literally held back that edit we did 5 weeks ago just so I could release it at an event so that we could get more momentum, and it worked. It created an incredible spike.
Brilliant.
Work it in with your branding. So, for example, Craig Bundren, he's a Tony Robbins plat, and basically rebranding his business. So he let me share this image. You guys are one of the very few people that have actually seen this new brand. And look at the podcast in the middle, the Chromatic podcast. I did all the branding for all the different logos for the things that we're doing. But look at it in context with your bigger plan. Does your podcast, by name, his business is about it's about painting, and Chroma is the magazine. Chromatic is the podcast, which has to do with paint and color, right? It's a Bundren Painting Company, Bundren Foundation. So make sure it's congruent. If you really want it to tie in with what you're doing, find a way to make sure that from a branding standpoint, it really ties in and makes sense for people. And, for him, it's like the branding fits in with the branding that he's doing. And, and I look at these little clips, these here, I don't know if I click it, will it play?
No. It looks like it will.
Yeah.
Building murals was.
So this is a great product. You can brand and create these audio clips that then become really great ways to activate content. So I just really want to inspire people. Like, you can really make beautiful content, even though it's audio, but make it super visual at the same time. And sometimes you have the podcast host face on it. Sometimes you don't. Like I just kind of come up with different strategies. And in this case, this is the branding template that he's using. Where are we at here? Just check them around. Good. So the next one is people want to figure out what's your podcast concept. So this would be a great way to kind of go, what am I doing? What is my concept? The concept should be it's interview, the first one. Bring people to the show and then they're highlighted on the show. Or you can do an education one. So if you're going to do an education one, for example, this would be a great segue to eventually be prepared for the audio future. So if you're a plumbing company, you could do a podcast on tips on how to do plumbing, do them as 5-minute segments, audio, and then eventually when Alexa comes on board and they want to do an audio tutorial about how to fix if that's even possible, then that would actually be a perfect segue. You have the content ready and you turn the switch. Maybe that's what you're going to do. Editorial, which is looking at other people's content and talking about it. Fiction, that's like telling stories, storytelling or just, doing like they have the spooky hour and things like that. And then a solo episode where you're just the podcast episode. You do rants and you just talk about what you want to talk about. So, and there's probably other ones, but those are the ones that I came up with just to kind of help people figure out, like, what are you? What buckets would you go in, right? So to me, probably the biggest thing goes back to when we looked at the fundamentals. I said on the 5th question was, how are you unique? So this is my quick coaching session with the time we got to show how do you come up with your unique point of difference, UPD. So you think of your type, what type of podcast am I going to be? What's my theme? So type is I'm going to be an interview, right? So you have your audience in the middle. So I'm in an interview. I'm in business and strategy marketing. So you look at that theme, you look at that category within the podcast because they have them in categories. That lets me know where I fit. So I know that's my type, that's my category, but how am I different in this category? I'm about rapid and sustainable growth marketing. I knew that growth marketing would be easily searched. Marketing is easily searched, but I wanted to go sustainable growth marketing would get me people who are really interested in the environment, the planet, also that thinking, which is also ties into exactly what my book is, which is sustainable growth marketing. So, but you also want to go who. You could make all this stuff unique, but if it doesn't connect with who. So for me, I wanted to make sure that my content, my visuals, all this branding fit into entrepreneurs who want freedom with predictable, repeatable growth in business. That means they're fucking willing to do the work. I don't want the people that want to get their marketing done quick and that stuff. This podcast isn't for them. Don't care. I want to be so particular about people. These entrepreneurs, they want their freedom, but they're willing to follow a practice that's going to give them repeatable business. And they want to know how is it. I want to know the results, the thinking, the strategies and stuff, right? So, and then you just kind of tie it together, and then that creates your intro. And if you listen to my podcast after this, you'll catch it. So mine is helping entrepreneurs grow their business so they can be free by connecting them to sustainable ideas from outstanding guests, which are my humans, or humans that are my guests. And I introduce my podcast right away, the first few seconds going, aloha, welcome to Groundswell Marketing Podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I try to anchor that idea of the UPW right from the beginning. So that's how you actually make your value proposition right in the voice in the script that you got. So do we have time for micro strategy?
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I know you've got a hard stop at 7, so
this is another half an hour in the micro strategy. So that's about as far as I can go. That gives you guys something to go with. How about you
do this next time? And I will say, just like Scott is saying how he's got 5 podcasts that he's got to go and edit. Just remember this: you don't have to be the guy that's editing your podcast. I'm speaking to Scott Martin as well. I'm speaking to Scott. Scott, you don't have to do it yourself either, right?
I don't. I could. It's a snap of a finger for me to do it. It's for me. There's something about me doing it that I'm learning some different techniques and I'm trying different things. So for me, I'm just like I'm constantly in a state of testing, constant state of innovating. And if I get to a point where it's formulaic and I kind of feel like I've pinned it, which I kind of have now, I could probably just go, here's my template. I want you to do this and go. So totally true. You don't even need to know the tech. You can hire it out, record it, tons of options.
Yeah. And that's something that we can talk about another time as well, because again, I'm also looking, by the way, if anybody who's watching knows how to do this or is really effective at doing it, I've got about 125 episodes that I need to strip the audio from.
I've got the guy for you.
Oh, perfect. So we'll talk offline about that. Listen, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming on here. And I know you've got a hard stop, so we'll just end it here and just remind everybody. Yeah, I'll close it up without you. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. And I will see you next Actually, next Monday I might be traveling. We'll talk between now and then. I might be in transit.
Okay.
So
See you, buddy.
have
Have a good
All right,
one.
brother. Appreciate you.
Okay, bye.
Yes, Jay, this video is available to rewatch. Yeah, a lot of great stuff, man. Scott's always dropping a ton of knowledge. So we are streaming directly to YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/C/GetUpNGrow, and you'll find not only this episode, but the last 7 or 8 episodes that he's done with us. And just absolutely amazing content. He's dropping it all the time. So thank you, Roseanne. I appreciate you coming on here. And just remember, we are on here every Monday with Marketing Mondays with Scott. Again, this coming Monday might be a little different just because I might be traveling that day. But yeah, join us we're here 6 days a week. And again, this week, because I'm going to be traveling, might be one of the weeks that I'm not going to be here every day. Yes, I will put the link in here. As a matter of fact, here, I'll just give you the URL right now. But I will be traveling this week, so there may be a couple of days that I'm not on here. But tomorrow I'm going to have another fantastic guest. So just join us tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern every day. Well, I should say Monday through Saturday. Let me just put this in here, .com/C. So here you go. This is the YouTube address for not only this video, but for all videos. I'm putting it up on the screen here so you can just copy that. So yeah, join us there. And again, remember that it really is about innovating. It's about how you communicate with people, and the best communicator, the best one, the one who gets the message out the best wins, because everybody's competing for your attention, for your business, for your just for your time. So if you're going to put some content out, make sure that it's worth listening to, make sure that it's worth watching, make sure that it's compelling. And I guess a good judge of it would be, would you pay for it? Granted, you're doing this for free, but would you be willing to pay for the content that you're putting out? And if the answer is no, then maybe you need to change up what you're doing. And remember that you don't have to edit these videos yourself. You can easily get someone else to do it for you through Fiverr or whatever else. I'm actually in the process of getting the right person, because again, I've got 125 of these that I've got to strip the audio from. So when I get that resource from Scott, I'll share it on here as well. And in the meantime, my friends, thank you for coming on, by the way. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for just coming out here and participating. Roseanne, you can watch it on Facebook or YouTube. Matter of fact, if you'd like, I'd love you to go on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. I do need more viewership there. So Jay, Roseanne, I'd love to have you guys go on there. Would you pay for content? Absolutely. Yeah. That's a good measure. That's a good yardstick to measure by, because there are a lot of people, as Scott was saying, there's a lot of people with something to say, but not everybody's worth listening to. And I say that with all the humility, because maybe somebody's listening to what I'm saying and feel that maybe it's not worth listening to, and that's okay. But if you think that it's worth it, then go out and do it. And just remember, dare to suck, be willing to suck, right? Because everyone that's a professional was once a beginner. Well, everyone that was remember that. Everyone that's a professional was once a beginner. The man at the top of the mountain did not land there. He had to climb it. So we all have a mountain to climb. And with that said, my friends, remember that life is not about how many times you fall. It's about getting up after every fall and realizing and knowing that when you fall, you have the opportunity to learn. And when you get up, you grow. And every single time you fall, you have the opportunity to get up and grow. And grow we must, because many of us just get up and go. But what we have to do is we have to get up and grow. Otherwise, you're just going to keep going through it. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow, 6 o'clock. And that's it. Ciao for now. Appreciate all of you.